go. Thank you all for coming. I see a lot of familiar faces. Welcome, everyone. Again, this Parent Academy is being videotaped as the previous one we placed on the website, so that you can go back and review if you're arguing with somebody else who's here over what I did or did not say. We could also point out, please, to other folk that it's on the website, so if they're unable to make it, they can get the same information. Also, I will publish the presentation itself, so you don't feel the need to necessarily scribble down notes or try and color in bar graphs the way I have for you. You'll have access to all of that on the internet. Little disclaimer before I start, I have no idea what it was, but about a week ago something happened to my voice. So I apologize if it sounds like I'm straining, just making sure you can hear me. If you can't hear me at any point in time, please let me know. Well said. Thank you. The purpose of tonight's Parent Academy, twofold. First, primary reason is to make sure for parents in the Parent Academy that we understand some key pieces about PARCC, the new assessment. The data has just been released this week. What it is, what it is not, what it means for us, and most importantly, we're going to spend a little bit of time going through the new individual student report, which is we've been used to our ASK and our HESPA reports for over a decade. It takes on a completely different tenor. The report is dramatically different than it was in the past. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about resources for parents, how to read the report, and then what to do with the information after you read the report. Those reports we have not received at the elementary level yet. We will be hopefully sending them out before the break. Ideally, we talked about possibly preparing them right after parent conferences or something, but again, until we get them, we can go through them and make sure we have everything that is actually accurate. We won't send anything out. Feel free to stop. At the end, I always have time for general questions and the rest, but if something I say sparks something, you have a question, feel free. There's a small enough group here where we can certainly have a conversation about whatever it is so you don't forget it as we move through the rest of the presentation. I do want to thank Ms. Russo, who's here, a member of our Board of Education, Mr. Balsamo, who is a member-elect of the Board of Education. We have, as you can see, an incredible number of administrators, as well as some teachers in the room. Our tech support, I just want to thank them for being here. I did not hold the data away from them so that they had to come here. They, for the most part, have had it, but as you can see, they take it seriously and they want to make sure that we're all in this together. So we're going to start without any further ado. Always kicking off here, reminding everyone that our mission is students. There were a lot of informed and uninformed conversations around PARCC, around Common Core. There still is a lot of both misunderstanding and misinformation out there. We want to make sure as a community, we can't control everyone else, but within Nutley, that we're informed and we're having valid conversations based on actual information. We can all take that information as we will, but we want to make sure, at least as a starting point, our information is accurate and consistent. So we want to make sure we're always focused on our mission, which is students. I always come back to this, I do a lot with staff. When we wrote our strategic plan 5 years ago, my favorite part actually was this slide, this idea of what is the value as a community. The very first word challenge, I would say that PARCC has presented a number of challenges for communities, for states, for educators, for students, for school districts, for administrators. And we put that word there because as a group of 65 representing this community, we felt that challenges are what make you strong. Not something to be shied away from, they have to be handled appropriately, and that by being a district and a community that handles challenges in that way, with positivity, with collaboration, and with the general idea that regardless of the challenge, it's going to make us stronger, we set a great model for our kids. And that's really what we're about. So again, this idea of value, we keep coming back to this. It's helped us in the past 4.5 years in a number of ways. The PARCC, why we're talking about the beginning. There's this concept called the honesty gap. The honesty gap is basically the idea that every state in the country, based on federal requirements, was issuing its own state tests. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Texas, Hawaii, New Jersey, their own state tests. At the same time, all of our students, while being assessed differently, were going to colleges, universities, and the workforce, prepared to different levels of success. And the idea behind our assessments were that these assessments should tell us, especially high school, how prepared our kids are for colleges and universities, as well as for the workforce if they're going directly into it. What they have been finding as they compared clearinghouse data, national data gathered through the National Center for Academic Statistics, they were finding that the number of students who either could not get into a 2 to 4 year college, or for those who did, those who needed remedial courses right out of the game, and beyond that, those who were not able to graduate within 5 years, not 4 to 5. If you took those numbers and compared it to the numbers that states were telling its constituents, the students actually had levels of proficiency and preparedness, there was a huge gap between. Depending on the state, the gap was larger than others, smaller than others. New Jersey had a fairly significant gap. And so our legislature here in the state of New Jersey recognized that our HESPA, along with our ask, which supported the HESPA 3 through 8, was not giving us an accurate depiction. When over 90% of our kids were easily proficient on the assessment, and yet if you just look at our state colleges and universities, the percentage of students that need remediation walking in as freshmen is astronomical compared to the number of kids that were prepared. So the state was committed to finding a different way to come up with a better, more aligned assessment and replace the HESPA with end-of-course specific assessments that give us a better idea as to how our students are performing. They also though want to make sure that the assessments were aligned. And so it's not just coming up with a high school assessment or a number of high school assessments, it's coming up with a way of assessing our students as they progress through our educational process so that we know in 4th grade if kids are on track. We don't wait until 9th grade to say, oh my gosh, what happened? And so the asks were not necessarily aligned that way, and they certainly weren't aligned with the HESPA. What the PARCC set out to do was create from 3rd through 11th or 12th grade a system of connected assessments so that we knew at any point in time how students were progressing. And that's the critical piece. We don't want to waste 5 years not knowing. District to district, state to state, we've been assessing students, and you hear in the news certainly sometimes people feel we assess too much, we assess too little, we don't assess the right way. But one thing that was consistent was everyone was assessing. Because of that, we had different information coming in different ways to different districts. And there was no way of knowing, okay, if I'm a student in Nutley and I'm getting an A, number one, is that true proficiency? And number two, how does that A hold up against A's in Princeton or Ridgewood or in Hawaii? Because when we apply, when I leave school for jobs or to colleges and universities, I'm not competing against students from New Jersey, I'm competing against any student who's trying to get into those jobs or into those colleges and universities. So where does that information put us? The more we know, hopefully, the more effective we can be in supporting students. That was the state's goal. And so they came up with this idea. They joined a national consortium around Common Core, and then out of Common Core, which are standards, the definition of what kids should know and be able to do, New Jersey joined the PARCC consortium, a group of states that put their money and their talent and resources into design assessments that were appropriately rigorous at each grade level in assessing English and Language Arts 3 through 8 and specific content courses at the secondary level, being your English and Language Arts 9th, 10th, and 11th, as well as your Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. So those are the assessments that we gave across the consortium, certainly across the state of New Jersey, last spring. It was given in 2 parts. Moving forward, it will be given in 1. As we now get this data, the first piece, because we're going to have to reset everything we know about state assessment, for the past however many years, there have been 3 levels of proficiency that have been documented by a student. Level 1 was partially proficient, level 2 is proficient, and level 3 is advanced proficient. Level 1 is the only level of the 3 that was not meeting expectations. So you had 3 levels of performance, 2/3 of which were at least good, if not great. Now moving to PARCC, there are 5 levels of performance. Okay, and as you see here, levels 1 through 5, not meeting, partially meeting, approaching, meeting, and exceeding. We went from 2 out of 3 being great to 2 out of 5 being great. On top of the fact that everyone was in agreement that the assessments themselves demanded more of our students at each grade level in each content. Idea being, our previous assessments were giving us this honesty gap. So obviously we have to raise the bar if we're going to accurately predict which students are ready for college and career. A number of institutions, most recently the Fordham Institute, have done studies gathering this data and correlating the PARCC data against 2 other statewide assessments. They didn't use New Jersey's because ours was not rigorous. The most important being the MCAS, the Massachusetts assessment. Generally regarded as the gold standard of state assessments. It has proven year after year to be most predictive when you're talking about college and career readiness. And in that comparison, the Institute found that the PARCC assessments were at least as rigorous, appropriately, and at least as predictive of college and career readiness. And so that information has been going out. Again, I want to state clearly, I have nothing to do with PARCC creation. I have not invested in PARCC. I'm not a PARCC proponent. It's simply the data that the state has given us this year. However, when we start to line up the data you're going to see today with multiple indicators in the past, when we used that for our ASC and our HESPA, they told us everything all over the chart. All of a sudden, with this new data, though, things seem to be lining up, and I'll talk about that as we go. The state released the overall state performance data 2 weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago, this is how the state of New Jersey performed. And so what you have here in English Language Arts, by grade level, is the percentage of students that fell into each level. Level 1, which is not yet meeting, level 2 partially, level 3 approaching, 4 meeting, and 5 exceeding expectations. The column all the way to the right, we call 4+, those are students who, the total number of students who met proficiency, whether they were meeting expectations or exceeding expectations, they were where they needed to be or beyond. Okay, so if you look at that last column, kind of eyeball it, let's just round numbers, say 50 is your average. Basically saying that 1 out of every 2 students in the entire state of New Jersey was actually found to be proficient at grade level on these assessments. 50%. That's down from your 80s or 90s, depending on which ASC you were talking about before, and your HESPA. Remember that the vast majority of high school students in this state fulfilled their graduation requirement of state assessment through the HESPA, which means you're talking about over 90% at the end of the day, whether it was the first time, the second time, or the third time, they're passing the HESPA. Some way, shape, or form. Dramatically different, as you can see, with these numbers. Okay, almost cutting those in half. A great number of people immediately said, well, just to prove what we said, the test is too hard, this is unfair to our kids, etc., etc. However, if you take the high school secondary numbers, it lines up with what our data tells us about college and career readiness. Our clearinghouse data, which tells us how kids are actually performing when they get to college. These numbers are actually in line with that. The other piece, the state of New Jersey recognized the honesty gap about 5 years ago. They reached more than about 6 years ago. They worked with an outside company to develop an internationally benchmarked assessment for our algebra students. They gave that assessment in 2011. The scores were almost identical to what we're seeing now 4 years later from when they gave it. Okay, so what we are seeing is that as we try to move to an appropriate level of rigor, we keep getting the same similar scores across the board. If you look at our SAT and our ACT data as a district, it lines up with our overall high school. I presented this last week, our overall high school performance as secondary students using the PARCC. If you tried to connect SAT and ACT data to our HESPA scores, you would not see a correlation. One would be incredibly high, and the rest of them would be toward the middle of the middle, which is a phrase, unfortunately, that we've been using for a while here as we look at our data. So these are our English language arts scores. Keep in mind that last column as I switch to math. These are the states. Math scores, again, just jump to the last column. Hopefully you see, just trying to eyeball, scores went up, stayed the same, or went down compared to the previous slide. Down. It went down. You can see that, yes? Where we were around 50, now I think we're solidly in the 40s as a state. And what do you see as the math gets more difficult? Read down.
It's not good.
Sorry?
It's not good.
It gets worse. If it wasn't good to start, the numbers go down. As I'll tell you, this is the big one. Algebra 1, 36% across the state. When we gave our algebra test in 2011, I think we're at 34% proficiency. I'm wondering what would have happened if the state had held to that standard and every district really had to move instruction 4 years ago, what the numbers would be on the PARCC. But we didn't, we got rid of the test. Okay, I don't know what happened with PARCC, but I can tell you the important thing about tonight is understanding the data and then making sure we're using it appropriately as parents, as educators together to make sure we're doing what we need to for students.
What are the states that?
Sorry, yes.
PARCC?
There were 13 of them last year. I don't remember them off the top of my head. My understanding is that we're down to 7 this year, partly because states like Ohio, I think, dropped out because they got members back and they're looking for a different assessment. And I know that they got slammed in the legislature because after they made that decision, a number of people started sharing all this comparative data saying, well, wait, we just dropped the test because we said it was too rigorous, but all these studies are coming out saying it's actually appropriately rigorous. Where we will end up by April, I don't know. And as far as the state of New Jersey, they've told us we're staying with PARCC for the foreseeable future. But that could change in any given year, the contract. So the pool has gotten smaller from last year to this year. It's interesting to see what happens. Also, one of the things if I forget to say, please remind me to say, data is sometimes difficult to understand. We can't make assumptions. Massachusetts is one of the states that's in the PARCC consortium. However, Massachusetts did not use only PARCC as a statewide assessment last year. Massachusetts allowed districts to choose to either give the PARCC or continue with the MCAS, as all the data had shown that the MCAS was, again, the gold standard for state assessments. So when we look at the PARCC data from Massachusetts, it's not indicative of the entire state. And because we don't know who did and who did not take it, I can't tell you what it means for subgroups. Different demographics, social and economic status, race, ethnicity, all the things that we break our test scores down by, we can't necessarily do that accurately from outside of Massachusetts because we don't know who did it. Okay? The questions here. We don't have to agree with PARCC. We don't have to agree with the standardized tests. And again, the numbers necessarily don't have to, in our minds, be a defining characteristic of this district. In many ways, remember, this is one piece of data that we always look at state assessment. It certainly has never defined everything that Nutley Public Schools is and provides to the students. But it obviously is an indicator that we have to look at. In the past, all we've had pretty much were those numbers. This year and moving forward, what we have been told is that PARCC is opening up a vast vault of data that we've never had before on individual students so that we can actually break down those numbers, those large numbers that we're looking at, to see exactly where our program is successful, where our program may be struggling, where individual students or groups of students are successful, or where they may be struggling. It's giving us a wealth of information that we have never had on our individual students so that we can get down not just at the program level at the district, talking about our curriculum, our resources, our professional development, but actually dig down into individual buildings, grade levels, and classrooms to see how individual kids are doing and what teachers can do about it now. As I talk about and share the data from last April, tonight, one of the things you should keep in mind is that we are almost halfway through this year already. Feels like that at least. We'll be taking the PARCC again from April. April will be here before we turn around. Our question really shouldn't be, how did we do last April? Our question is, what can we learn from last April that's going to help us on this coming year? How do we keep moving that? We call that growth and progress. How do we keep that moving forward? So this is our leading question. As educators, these have been our guiding questions since we started getting information back. But are we looking at our program? Are we looking at our process? And are we looking at individual students? It's interesting because all these different students were in different third grade or fourth grade classes last year. They're in totally different fourth grade and fifth grade classes this year. How do we get last year's data in a meaningful way into the hands of the teachers who have the kids now so that we can make adjustments while at the same time getting last year's data into the same teacher's hands so they can make program adjustments? Yes?
I should have asked this last slide.
Sure.
Is that both sets of tests? Because they took it March and then May. So
What they did was the PARCC was designed in two pieces to assess the skills differently, and those two pieces were combined into one score. So we will be getting information back on all the different assessment pieces, not necessarily in the two stages that they were given, but based on the individual kinds of questions kids were struggling with, the content they were struggling with. We were told that even we will have some item analysis capabilities, which we'll be able to break down our answer choices across groups, by individual students, by like groups of students, by the whole grade level to see, okay, not only why this is what they got wrong, but how they go about getting it. Were there consistent misunderstandings that we can address in our instruction, or was it all over the place? So all that's happening. Yes?
this year there was just really one test?
One assessment. They took both pieces and they combined them. So instead of having two windows, we only have one. And that was it. For tonight's presentation and for our conversation moving forward, we want to make sure that we get you the right information as parents. And you have to be prepared to say, well, what can I do with this information? That's, again, the primary crux of tonight's presentation. A few things. In order to make this happen, there are a wealth of resources, some effective, some maybe a little bit less effective, in helping you not only understand history of the park, the actual assessment, and each individual piece that your child may have done well on, but also to understand what you can then do with that information, not just in talking to teachers, but in what you can do at home to help your students kind of reach this level of rigor, this new level of rigor posed. In order to do this, one of the resources I've always pointed people to is, just like we ask of the teachers, I have my own website, just like teachers will post information to the rest. I have a website up there, it's my classroom website. On the left-hand side, there are all the different individual posts, and what I'm trying to do is to pick off small topics or take big topics and break them into small topics and post briefly so that the information is there. As far as PARCC, the last, I think 7 of the last 8 posts have been about PARCC as we've been gearing up for this. One of the pieces, though, as you see there, it says on the left, PARCC resources. I've pulled apart the resources that have been shared with me by others to have been found to be the most effective in clarifying and assisting, and I've described them for you. So if you're looking for different information about the state assessments, about the development of the tests, any of those, you can go right to that website, and there's going to be about 15 or 20 different resources that are described for you, so you don't have to spend your time Googling and randomly clicking on links, or having 15 in front of you but not knowing what each one will help you with. So it's a nice place to start. The other piece, and this is on my website, but I wanted to point out, is understandthescore.org. It's an organization that was kind of a subset of PARCC saying, listen, we want to get out of this. We want to make sure they understand exactly what it is we're doing. The website literally is just understandthescore.org. And what I wanted to do is actually use the website to walk through what your score reports will look like. Number one, so you see the website, then it can be useful, that it is clear and understandable, but also I think it's probably the most efficient way to do that. I wasn't going to recreate a tool that was already effective. On the website here, you see you can pick either English language, arts, or math. I will tell you that the formats are the same. But the reports that you will be receiving home will look like this. And I want to walk through the pieces. On the left-hand side, you see an example of an actual report. It will be 2 pages. So one page started with double-sided. It is color-coded. We've never had color before, so we're moving. There are different pieces of the report. We're going to be clear the role that each piece actually plays. On this first page, the first piece enlarged over here, in this area of the report, is your overall performance, which simply states exactly what level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 your child achieved on the overall assessment. In this case, it's English language arts. Does that help? Better?
Yes.
So again, this is an enlarged version of this box over here, which shows you just there's, if you want one-stop shopping, highest level of feedback, here's how your child did. In this case, this student was approaching, but had not yet met expectations in English language arts. Okay. Step 2, they talk about, you have a bar graph. This was a little less than promised, and I was upset by that, but there are 2 pieces here. You can see where it is in the report. It's enlarged on the right-hand side. It is a color graph that breaks down for you the full range of performance, raw score-wise, number-wise, from 650 to 850, and where your student falls. Okay, so in this case, this student falls literally directly in the middle. The more important piece, in my mind, and I thought they were going to have this actually visually represented, I don't know why they didn't do it. Can everyone see the 4 gray boxes underneath? You have your student score up top, that's the circle that's on the actual bar chart. But then you have, sorry, that's my fault. You have the school average, the district average, the state average, and the PARCC average. Why would that be important to you as a parent?
So you know how your child compares across all of those levels, all of those
Exactly.
different areas.
Things to keep in mind. This student is not proficient. But if every other score in that gray box is to the left of your students, while he or she may not be proficient, he or she is also doing what? Better than everybody else, outperforming like students in the content area. So this gives you that information. We were told that we were going to draw the different dots on there for you, state, district, PARCC, etc. You can certainly take a pencil and write them in. I don't know why they didn't provide them, but they did at least give us the numbers. This to me is the most critical piece because it tells you where am I in the pack. Okay, I talk to a lot of people, let's pretend at the Ask and the HESPA we were always asking kids to run a mile for the assessment. Yes? We had to increase the rigor, so now we have them running marathons. Well, we take kids who've been preparing for miles and ask them to run a marathon, The vast majority of them are not going to do very well the first time out, yes? The idea, though, is if everyone was running a mile, and I knew where I was in the pack, and now everyone has to run a marathon, let me see where I am in the pack to see how I progressed against everyone else. So it may take me, my best marathon was in the low 4s. World-class marathons are in the low 2s. It shows you how I am compared to a world-class marathon. Twice as bad, half as good. You very well, the first time out, may run a 6-hour marathon. First of all, congrats, you finished the marathon. That's a huge piece. Second of all, though, where did everybody else fall? Because most other people finished in 7.5, and I guess your training regimen is really working. And if you stick with it, you may end up where we want to be, in that 5, 4, 3.5 hour marathon. That's our goal. I don't know any other way. I'm sorry if I use the sports metaphors too much, but I always go there. We want to keep that in mind. This section of the report gives you that information. I may not be proficient, but I may be outperforming everybody else. The same may be true, though. I may be level 4 proficient, but if everybody else is well above me, then I have some work to do. Questions? We go to the third piece. You actually have an individual score breakdown. So again, you have the enlarged portion on the right. On the left, though, we're talking about this red box here. They've now broken down the English language arts section into critical areas, and they've given you visual and numeric representations of how your student did in each of those areas. They did worse than everyone else, they did about the same as everyone else, they did better than everyone else. So you can start to see where those strengths and weaknesses lie. Okay? We flip to the second side. Mouse will work. There we go. This is the second page. This really critical piece. It not only highlights the different levels for you, but it answers questions like, what now? What do I do now with this information? What does it mean? How do I put this together for language arts? And again, they're specific not only to the content area, but to the grade level. So you get a little bit different report, same format, but the information is different when you're talking about 3rd grade language arts versus 9th grade language arts. Questions about the report? Yes?
Yeah, I just have a question about the previous slide because I couldn't see very well.
Slide or here?
Yeah, right there. On the left are those areas that they break down.
Mhm.
I can't. It's a little blurry. Are those the standards that the
These are
questions were based on?
Groups of standards: literary text, informational text, vocabulary, written expression, and knowledge and use of language and composition. They are the old strands, if you will. They're similar to the strands that we used to test. They've taken standards and compact them into groups. That's what those initial scores are. That's what we used to get on the ask in general. What we are supposed to get now is a breakdown of those by students so we know where within those they were successful and where they struggled. That's where the real work actually starts.
Will parents get that information as well?
That's actually, it's a separate database that's only available to students, to school districts. It hasn't been released to us yet, so I still don't know what it's going to look like and what we can share, what we can't share. They haven't told us that yet.
So as a parent, what would you be getting at first?
You get the first page and the second page together. You get that information. The next piece is for us to understand. And what I wanted to show here is that as I go back to my presentation, staying in line with this idea of understanding the score, I mentioned the score report guide. I just showed you that. That was live. That's their actual website. On the website itself, though, there's a whole section on resources for parents to your question. They break down each of those areas by grade level. They give you in terms that are just lay terms, not speak with all the acronyms and the rest. Information on what each of those sections that we just asked about and talked about actually mean at 3rd grade, at 5th grade, so that you can see those pieces and it breaks down all that information for you. There are individual videos. What do I expect from a school report? Why is my score so much lower or higher than it was in the past? What do these other numbers mean? They break down all of that so you can see those pieces, but also that section in the middle, helping your child, depending on where your scores are and where they were showing strength in those 6 areas, the kinds of questions you can ask your kids at home, the kinds of readings you should be doing with your kids, the kinds of things you should be sharing with your kids, depending on how they scored. This is broken down. We have more resources, as I mentioned, as a community than we've ever had before because of this work. Okay, it's really up to us to figure out which ones are meaningful and then leverage those in a meaningful way. Right.
If the goal is to learn from the data,
Yeah.
you just referenced that they're gonna tell us what we can share and not share. What would the purpose be of not sharing?
I don't know exactly how they're sharing it. If they're sharing questions, I'm going to guess that because they're copyrighted. I don't know what we're going to be allowed to share beyond districts. They've already shared sample work. They've shared anchor work with us. So our kids did a lot of writing. They were assessed by humans who had to say this was a 3, this was a 4, this was a 5. They have given us, in state by state, a bank of the actual student responses that have been scored. So we have examples of 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s. Each of those examples beyond the score also has specific feedback. So we can see exactly what it was that was leading to those scores. To make sure that we're at least as rigorous in our instruction, our expectations for our students. We've moved to rubrics in our classes. I think you've noticed that over the past 2 years. The reason for rubrics is that the students shouldn't give in work and then wait to see what grade is. Students should know when they're creating the work exactly what high expectations look like. That's the idea behind anchor work and rubrics. So the same kind of philosophy here was that sharing with the educators what they're looking for. Now we may disagree with some of it. I don't know if we will or we won't. But the idea we actually see it for the first time will be huge. Sal?
Yeah, no, my question was, I understand that portion, you probably can't share questions or student work, but in any of the reports that the parents get back, will they have, say,
Yeah.
your student did 36% on RL 3.1 or?
No, my understanding is that the scoreboard I just showed you with those little blue bubbles with the arrows up, down, or side to side, that's the most specific that we will be seeing. In the past, we had strand reports and you got a score on your students. What you didn't get was how they actually performed against others. So it did add a piece of data that we've never had in the past, so you can kind of take that 270 and go, well, what does the 270 mean? Well, it's supposed to be proficient, great, well, where was everybody else? We don't know. You have to break on other data to find it. Now we're actually giving it to you right in your report, so that you have that one-stop shopping and say your teacher, so it seems like Russ is working on grade level, am I right? Yeah, actually that's what the score stands, it's also what we found in class. Hopefully that is always the connection. But so again, this as a resource is something that I highly recommend as you get you can go on right away. This was just one excerpt that I jumped on because I'm a parent of a student who took part last year. My daughter took 3rd grade PARCC. So she had way too much fun, that's why I'm worried about getting her score back. She said she really enjoyed it. Where is my child doing well? Where does he or she need additional support? How can I help? They have a full article just on that topic that leads to other resources. The nice thing about the internet is it connected all the resources for you. So as you read through an article like this, and there's 6 different options for your kid, which one applies, click on that one, now you're reading what you want, not everything. So I highly recommend at least exploring this website to start to get more answers beyond what we could present in one parent guide. Okay? What I wanted to share, actually, I shared the next 2 slides at the board meeting yesterday. I don't like numbers, and what I mean by that is I love numbers. But I don't like to present numbers because I feel like they've just become a cloud of blue. So what I usually do is I transition the numbers from numbers and tables into actual charts so that you can see graphically exactly how the numbers play against one another. I will show those in a second. What I talked about at the board meeting is that, I go back to that phrase middle to middle. We have a number of things in this district that are exceptional. We have things that we're constantly working on and adding. But over the past, I can't even go back how long. When I came here, my first meeting with the principals, remember, we started with, I'm coming in brand new just to try and have a conversation about where we are. And I shared a newspaper article from the Nutley Sun. State test scores released, Milburn, Common, Nutley tops in state. I shared that to a conversation because half of that was true. It wasn't the Nutley portion. There was a belief that we were performing higher than our data was actually saying we were performing. And the problem with that isn't who's good, who's bad, because we're great. The problem, though, is you cannot get better unless you know actually where you are. As we've been talking over the past 4.5 years, we've been finding this idea that if you look at our overall performance, we're middle to middle. If you look at the state overall, and if you look at most of the indicators, and this is why the ask and the HESPA state found needed to be replaced. If you look at even something that I don't buy into, but like New Jersey Monthly when it comes to your best high schools across the state, where does Nutley High School fall? Anyone? I already gave you an answer. Middle to middle. Now we've made some progress over the last 2 years, well, 4 years. If you look at the last, we've actually incrementally moved up, which is what we're looking for. One thing I try and get out in these meetings, you will not take data, 4,000 student district, and go from 0 to 100 in a year or even two. What you want to see is constant, consistent, incremental growth in the right direction. And so that's what we're looking for. I share that now because as we go into the pictures, what I want you to key off on is that in the past we've seen lots of, if you look district-wide, buildings, subgroups may be different from year to year. But if you look at the state of New Jersey, you're usually right about where the state of New Jersey is. Sometimes a little better, sometimes unfortunately a little worse. If you connect that with our SAT scores as another outside anchor. Nutley High School's SAT scores are actually just below the national mean, middle to middle. So what we want to start to see is improvement in that. As you know from the initial numbers, again in this table, you have our district numbers in the next to last, I'm talking about to the right, and then you have the state's numbers. What do you see looking at the two of them?
District looks better.
Sorry?
The district looks better.
Yes. Overall, again, I'm looking at language arts now. You see all the way through, even up to grade 11, for the most part, there are dips and there are changes which we have to start to study. But just initial broad brushstrokes, we're not where we were. Okay, what you normally see if the state numbers are 40s or 50s, we might be a little higher, 55. But in many instances, what you're seeing here is 63, 64, 52, when the other number's 30. We're seeing significant statistical difference between ourselves and the state, where we hadn't necessarily before. Did everyone see that? That to us was news. Now again, we're not popping corks at this point. What we want to do is study the numbers and see what they actually tell us. Mathematics. Remember that math was better or worse than language arts across the state?
Worse.
Worse. So our numbers, math-wise, are worse than our numbers language arts-wise, but as you can see again against the state, if you're looking, we have some significant differences, grade level to grade level. Okay, and if you're starting to get a headache on numbers, I promise it's the last one you're going to have to look at. This is what we want to kind of talk about. When we get down to the teachers and talk about all the work that our teachers have done, our administrators have done. I had a teacher, I've been having meetings at the elementary buildings. I actually had one when we meet yesterday. What's it, Tuesday? We didn't meet on Sunday, right? It was Monday. We met on Monday. Hear a lot from the teachers, and I get a lot of feedback from some of our veteran staff saying, while we're still in the process of change, and change is stressful, and we've changed a great deal in a relatively short amount of time, they all understand why we did change what we did change. I didn't come here to change. I didn't come here to do that specifically. I came here so that we could kind of, as a group, say, where are we and how can we get better? A number of teachers have come to me. I get the same email from a teacher in Mrs. Carroll's building every June, thanking multiple people, but for the work that was done every year so far. Not that we're hope it's coming in this June. That at the end of last year, I didn't think we really could do anymore, but now I see, as I try this, I try that, if I buy into something else, we had a new administrator come in and help me, et cetera, et cetera. This is from a veteran teacher. From Ms. Egan's building, I think one of our best teachers in the district comes in every year and says, I didn't think I could, but I got better this year, let me show you how. And in my limited experience, he absolutely is one of the best teachers I've come across. I think one of the things that makes him such a great teacher is he's constantly pushing himself. And yet, if you walk into his classroom, the kids are all having fun. They feel comfortable, and so his stress doesn't become their stress. All that work is taking place. And I think these numbers, in a sense, are in part related to that. As we move, we talked about past trends already, this idea that middle to middle is what we're trying to buck. Ms. DeVillia was here, she was here before, at the secondary presentation. One of the areas we look at data-wise, in the past, if you look at our advanced placement scores, which are some of the most difficult regular courses we offer at the highest possible academic levels in the district. Where were we 4.5, 5 years ago? Middle to middle. Okay? Part of the issue, honesty gap, is that our grades were through the roof. But our advanced placement test scores, which are what are actually used to compare us against other students in other districts, were certainly not. Now there's much more of a correlation between not only our grades and the scores, but for 4 consecutive years, we have shown continued improvement in not just who's taking the course, but how those kids are doing on the advanced placement assessments. Our numbers continue to go up. Every year they go up, I have 2 reactions. I'm excited and thrilled for our teachers and our kids, and I'm nervous about next year's scores. Because statistically, I don't know how you keep that progress going, but 4 years in a row, we're pointing in the right direction and showing that kind of growth. My hope is that for these kinds of scores, when we get our PARCC scores in and look at them, yes, we look at now, but we look at now as a starting point and say, okay, this is the third grade scores from last year. They're currently our fourth graders. What are we doing right now to show that we are really growing each year? We're maximizing all the information they may or may not be giving us. So, I said pictures. What you see here is our mathematics scores. Yellow is the PARCC Consortium scores. Green is the state of New Jersey scores. And the maroon, obviously, to stick with school colors, maroon is our Nutley Public School scores. What I did here is that this is the percentage of students that were 4+. Everyone with? The test got harder. All proficiency levels went down. We went from that mile to that marathon. The question is, if everyone went from the mile to the marathon, how do our scores compare against others when you think back to past trends? As you can see, we held our own at least, if not better. Where do we struggle when it comes to math? Just looking at the chart.
How's up?
Sorry?
As it goes up.
We're following the same trends as the state in many aspects. It looks like worse, especially with the 7th and 8th. One of the things I would also talk about as our teachers tackle more, you know that we switched our math series. Which of our students did that hit the hardest? Last year's 7th and 8th graders, because they had the biggest gap to fill between what our old system was not teaching them, what was instilled in them by that old system, and what the new system expected of them. What I will say about that, though, is look at the kids who have been in the new system the longest compared to what they've had before. So the younger kids, how are they doing?
Great.
So our hope is, and talk to our teachers who, if Mr. Carney, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the quote was, Mr. Lassiter, you know we hated the new math when it came in, but we love it now. That was before they saw this. That was pretty close, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
It's not the program, it's the people. We have updated resources and everything. We have different professional development. At the end of the day, our teachers are doing things differently based on things they decided they want to do differently. They need to do. All these changes have come through a process, through our strategic plan. It's not just, well, let's take this. We spend a great deal of time studying successful districts, studying changes in different content areas and resources, and then going out as teams with teachers. We have students and parents involved in those pieces. Obviously, board members, certainly our administrators, and making decisions as we kind of fine-tune and slow step toward better. We don't want to catch up to the high-performing districts. We want to leapfrog past them. Yes?
In previous presentations, you talked about at the middle school, kids typically dip in their test scores,
Yep.
and then they don't catch up, and that's part of the reason to go to the 3-year minimum middle school model. I don't know if you can compare these scores to what you've seen with other standardized tests, but is it the same kind of dip that you're seeing?
Well, that's a perfect question for my segue, actually, and I appreciate that question. My answer directly is yes. Okay, this is exactly what we've been seeing here in Nutley. People have been talking about a lot of things in the community, and what we've been missing is that transition to what used to be our junior high is now our middle school, which Mr. Sullivan is here as well as Ms. Egan. That model, we're moving into it some time, but that has always been our trend. We tipped far too steeply in the wrong direction from 6 to 7. Almost every district, kids for the most part, performance will dip in the wrong direction every time there is a transition for the most part, which is why most districts try to minimize the number of times kids have to switch schools. I say that knowing full well that I live in a district that maximizes the number of times my poor kids have to transition. That being said, we do it a year after most everybody else, and because of that, our kids have one fewer year to catch up with everyone else from that day. You see that here. I want you to keep that in mind, though, because these are the math scores. Here are the language arts scores shown visually. To your point, I don't see that here. Now, why is that? I don't know. Ms. Benavides? Here's one of the things that we'll talk to you about. Ms. Egan and Ms. Benavides can clarify. Dr. Vaughn, feel free to jump in if you disagree. And I know we're on camera, so good luck with that. But my point is, I think our teachers at the middle school have jumped completely into the new model. They've been working with workshop now, which is radically different, even more so from an elementary going to workshop than from a middle school going to workshop. We have our kids reading more, reading higher level, talking about their texts in different ways, writing about their texts in different ways, and we're just at the beginning. Okay, so this is a pictorial representation of our 3rd through 8th grade scores. I wanted to tell this story as a district because obviously we have building by building data. What I haven't been able to do yet because they haven't shared the electronic format, although Mr. Big did they share it? So now we have it. I haven't had the time and I apologize. Doing observations, right, reports. To break down exactly what the data is telling us building by building. But one of the things I want to point out is that what should be happening first and foremost is the data is supposed to be reported by school of enrollment, not school of instruction. What I mean by that is if you move into the Spring Garden district and you live in Spring Garden, your kids are supposed to attend Spring Garden, but because of a special program or a variance or whatever, your child attends Washington School. Yes? The instruction's happening at Washington School, but the score is supposed to go in the Spring Garden column. We haven't confirmed that everyone is appropriately assigned, that the states have the data where it is. And so as we go through this, again, I'll share this on our website, you'll start to see school by school performance. The populations in every school are different. The previous scores in every school are different. And what you're going to see from year to year, as you look at, not year to year, from grade to grade, there is no consistent pattern across our 5 elementary schools in either language arts or math from 3 through 6. Okay? Washington's got 3rd grade, Radcliffe's got 4th grade, Lincoln School's got 5th grade. You're going to see those change. Okay? What I would recommend, as I always have, is not to dive into that data until we understand it and make statements about buildings or programs until we have time to actually break it down. Make sense? I don't want a huge, we talked about this before, all of a sudden everyone in school X is going to run at me for variances to school. The good news is, we're overcrowded everywhere, so I can't. But so, again, math, PARCC, language arts, PARCC, and just to keep that perspective in mind, mile to marathon, scores are going to go down, they went down for everyone. How did we fare against everybody else? Those are the big pieces. Just to give you an eyeball now, really stop at this point and take questions. In the rest of the presentation, as I scroll through, there's a lot of charts. There are 2 I just want you to understand. The first is, these are 100% stacked columns. Levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 performance going from the bottom to the top. Each one a different color. There are different numbers of students in each of those columns. But what the columns show you, because they're stacked, is how performance within each population stacks up against the other populations. As an example, Radcliffe School and Spring Garden have the fewest number of level 1 students than any of the other columns. You guys, do you see that? So again, you can kind of break down the tables and the numbers are there if you want them. But in this respect, Language Arts 3, that's how each of our schools fared against Nutley as a whole, the state of New Jersey, and the overall PARCC consortium. Does that make sense? What 2 colors do you want to see in your column?
Green.
Blue and green. Remember, no matter what, whether it's orange or yellow or red, it's not what we want. But remember again, we went from mile to marathon. We have to figure out for ourselves what proficiency really is going to look like. Yes?
The children that elected not to take the test, not the test,
Yep.
opt out, whatever you want to call it, how did that affect those numbers? Was it significant?
Let's talk about data again. It's a great point. A couple things. Second, there was a lot of talk about PARCC, this and that. People were opting out, not opting out. It doesn't count. It does count. I think as you get students who were older last year and paying more attention and understood, it certainly had more of an impact where kids either didn't take the test or didn't take the test as seriously as they have in the past. So we don't know what the data actually means. If we look at our individual scores and see, well, Russ did really well in math last year in school. How did he get this score in the PARCC? It just doesn't line up. Hopefully we're going to be able to disaggregate the data, maybe sit down, Russ, and say, well, did you take the test seriously? Well, no, I just answered randomly, and I didn't care. They told me they didn't count it. And we're finding out now to graduate from high school, it actually is one of the ways that could have counted if you took the test seriously and passed. And now kids are being forced to take other assessments to pass the graduation requirement simply because they didn't take it seriously. What I will say to that, though, is that's across the board. Students all over the PARCC consortium got whatever information they got and did or did not take it seriously, and we have no way of gauging that. So we have to take a lot of this data with a grain of salt. That it could have been totally different in another district. If we were in Montclair at the high school level, the vast majority of kids didn't even take the test, let alone take it not seriously. I will tell you that in Nutley, the students compared to other districts, the percentage of students who opted out, physically opted out of the test, was incredibly small. But that doesn't necessarily tell us the kids who opted out by not taking the test seriously. Okay? the same as it doesn't for anybody else in the PARCC consortium or across the state. What we kind of have to guess at, if you want to make determination from this level of data, is that it was about the same everywhere, which probably isn't true. You had different populations in every district, and when you put them together, it doesn't give you one true story. Which is why, while I share this data to give perspective, the important work comes at the individual level. If we get better data from this assessment than we've got in the past, we can look at our program, we can look at grade levels, we can certainly look at populations, but we can get down to individual students. And I think in the past, compared to the past, as parents, you have a great deal more resources than you've ever had, moving if you look backwards. So that all those pieces together, if we come together as a community, we can change these numbers and make them even better as we move forward. So this is the 100% stacked column.
Russ,
Yep,
were
sorry.
we able to identify class size, apply class sizes, size of class per elementary school?
Not just size of building, but
Yes.
actual class size at a grade level. Absolutely. Average, I would say that for the most part, across the 5 million class size is fairly consistent, but there are certainly peaks and valleys as you look building to building. We haven't looked at that at all yet. As we get the building ready, again, the principals got this data at 5 o'clock last night. It only opened yesterday. We literally got this data yesterday. So my job became in between everything else, making sure this was ready for all of you, so we can start the work as soon as possible. Again, what I don't want folks to do is jump to overwhelming conclusions about, as you start to break the data down smaller and smaller without actual specifics, you're going to get farther and farther away from a reliable result. Which is why if you look at those first 3 columns, that's where the data is most consistent at the largest level to this point. Okay, questions about 100% stack column? Every time you see this, you will also then see this. It's the same information, it's just as I showed you before, the 4+ amounts. Okay, so if you look by building, you've got your yellow PARCC, your green New Jersey, your maroon Nutley, and then all of our 5 buildings similar color-ish. So that you can kind of see where our 4+ was in compared to each other and the other 3 populations. Make sense? That's what you will see moving forward. You can dig into anything. Here's what we're looking at. This slide is important to me based on this year's, so 2016 PARCC, 4th grade scores. I'm not worried that Yanacall is here and Lincoln School is here and Radcliffe is here. I'm concerned about, okay, if you were there last April, where are you going to be this spring? That's my concern, because if we go back, remember, to these numbers, where things are looking pretty good compared to one another, if we've shown growth here, basically everyone fell, but we fell less. So we've accelerated, we've grown. How do we keep that acceleration going for a number of years till we get a system that is consistently supporting students in a way where they are performing and outperforming their peers? That's what we're building toward right now. So again, this data, not about who's where as much as what do we do next. Yeah.
Is there a certain benchmark for the district to hit? Meaning, do they give you a benchmark?
They normally do. In the past, we had yearly adequate yearly progress, which we had to hit based on where we were. So if we were at 70%, the state may require us to grow to 74%, but not 100. If you go back, honestly, to the early 2000s, everyone across the state had the same target number. Some districts were over that, some districts were at it, some districts were way under it. How is that fair if we're trying to show growth? The state changed that recently and said, well, wait, here's where we want everyone to be. If you're farther away, we've got to make jumps, but we're looking for growth. We're not looking to make as big a jump as everyone else. Okay? They are resetting all the baselines now that we have new data. Because we were running miles and now we're running marathons. You can't expect everyone to be fantastic with 1 year's worth of progress. Just like marathon training, once we get to understand the race, we will prepare differently, and you'll get, I think, different results. Again, I go back to the staff that we've had here, administration, teachers, all the support staff. They've been pushing for a long time without a lot of things that other districts had, and we still get some of them. So if we level the playing field, imagine what's possible. So that's what we're doing with these kinds of data. It's up there for everyone to see. I put language arts together all the way through 8th grade, and then I put math together all the way through 8th grade. these are the things that we're asking using this data. As we have the electronic format, we're told that we're actually going to be able to dump all that information, which are in more spreadsheet kind of format, into our performance database that we use for our internal assessments and the rest, and actually disaggregate the data for teachers at the individual level, look for patterns, and figure out what we can do within our instruction. Most specifically, we roll out these new programs. Where are the programs doing what they're supposed to? And where are the programs not necessarily doing everything we hope they would do? And therefore, how do we make those areas better? That's what we're moving on. These are the kinds of questions we ask on a regular basis. Did you have a question? Or you just stretching? With that, as I said, I will put everything online. I'm going to ask if we can turn the lights back on. Sorry. We went through PARCC. We talked about the individual school reports so you can understand kind of what it looks like, what it will mean for you, and where you can get your resources. And then we talked about the actual performance data and what it may or may not mean. It's year one. More important will be this meeting, which should take place not this time next year, but actually in June. Because what they've told us that we will actually, now that we've gone through the first iteration of PARCC, we will get student performance scores back before that academic year has ended. So if we test in April, we should get them back before the end of June, which means Parent Academy in June. My hope is that the numbers are at least as strong, if not a little bit stronger. Again, every little bit, year by year. I had a great question from a parent of high school students at last Tuesday's presentation, where he said, listen, I really appreciate it, I see the long-term vision, but what are we doing for my kids now? These questions, what we're asking about now, instruction should be continually shifting in small increments based on the important information we get from the kids. Which means we should already start to see continued improvement. We're not looking saying 5 years from now we should be good, but this year, right now, from last April to this April, welcome you to be a little bit better. All right, and we hope the parents are involved in that conversation in an informed way. We have our Parent Academy next Wednesday on the new report cards. And it really is a preparation for parent-teacher conferences. We made that significant shift so that the conversations you have at those conferences change from what they were in the past. And you walk out feeling more informed about exactly what your students are doing and how you can help them do even better. I think that's going to be a critical conversation if we can get as many people to that as possible. Otherwise, you will be walking into a parent-teacher conference that is 15 minutes long, asking the wrong questions, and you will not walk out with the appropriate information. We've done a lot of professional development on the teacher side. We have to do some professional development on the parent side to make sure that we come together as adults supporting the same kid most effectively. Okay. Questions? I answered every possible question. I want to thank you for coming out. We'll keep having these. I appreciate the emails and the feedback that we get. This stuff will be posted tomorrow on the website. And I just look forward to continually working with you guys to make sure we're doing the best for our kids here. All right? Have a great night.